XRP just shocked the crypto world. This changes everything. Look, Brad Garlinghouse said it, 14%. That's the number. That's what Ripple's looking to take over from Swift within the next 5 years. Something major happened overnight. And if you hold XRP, guess what? This could be your moment. Brad Garlinghouse, he was hanging out at Apex, floating around doing some interviews, and he dropped a bombshell most people completely overlooked. He was asked the question, how much does he see Ripple taking over Swift in the next 5 years? This isn't speculation. He said 14%. That's 14% of a trillions dollar market moving across borders every year. And XRP is positioned right in the middle of it. This isn't just a win. This is a shift in global financial plumbing, and the legacy system knows it. In this video, we're going to break it all down, exactly what Brad revealed, what this 14% number really means, and why it will bring XRP to levels that most of us have never thought were even possible. I got a beautiful PowerPoint, a beautiful slideshow ready to go for you. But first, without further ado, here's the clip. Have a listen, and then we're going to jump right into this.
5 years. 5 years, yeah. So, I mean,
it's for a dumb reason.
Swift today, there's two ways to think about Swift. There's the messaging, and there's liquidity. Right. Liquidity is owned by the banks. Right. I think less about the messaging and more about liquidity. Because if you're driving all the liquidity, that's good for XRP. Right. Anyway, so I'll say 5 years, 14%.
5 years, 14% of Swift will be running through Ripple, RippleNet, on-demand liquidity, the XRP ledger RLUSD. But what does this mean? Well, we're breaking this all down. Ripple capturing 14% of Swift's volume based on 1.25 quadrillion annual volume. You heard that correctly. Total Swift volumes estimated around 1.25 quadrillion per year. A 14% share or takeover by Ripple equals $175 trillion per year. That is $479 billion per day via RippleNet / the XRP ledger. Let's look at the macro GDP comparison here. 175 trillion is 1.8 times the world's GDP. 2024 estimated right around 97 trillion. So Ripple alone would be moving nearly twice the size of the entire US economy each year. Year over year adoption curve, if Ripple, I don't think it's an if, I think when Ripple captures 14% of Swift in this 5-year time frame, this implies a CAGR of about 50% in on-chain settlement volume, far outpacing even the fastest growing payment rails today. Swift fees generate $10 billion a year in revenue. $10 billion a year in revenue. A 14% volume shift could strip away up to $1.4 billion of fee income, forcing legacy rails to innovate or contract. When we look at the transaction cost efficiency, Swift costs about $20 to $50 per transaction. Ripple's cost using XRP, 0.0004. I mean, folks, it's practically free. There is a potential savings here of up to $1.75 trillion per year. That's insane. Absolutely insane. That's $64 trillion that can be reinvested into real economy projects. Discounting those fees at a 5% WACC yields an NPV of 1.2 quadrillion over 10 years, essentially funding multiple Marshall Plan scale initiatives. Such cost gaps will drive SWIFT member banks to subsidize corridor fees or risk outright defections to RippleNet partners. We knew those fees one day was going to catch up to them. As soon as Ripple started to put a dent into what Swift was doing and people started to catch wind of the massive savings here, that they would start to jump shift. But you know what? It always takes time, and it always takes the first couple of tier one banks to move over, because as Brad said, you don't want to be first, but you don't want to be last. And I don't blame them. You don't want to mess up when moving people's money. When we look at speed efficiency, we all know the stats here. Swift takes 1 to 5 days. XRP, 3 to 5 seconds. This will free up trillions in idle capital. Moving $479 billion in 5 seconds rather than 3 days frees up $4.7 billion in daily working capital, assuming a 0.25% opportunity cost, or 1.2 trillion per year in incremental credit capacity for emerging markets. Risk reduction here. Short settlement windows slashes FX and counterparty risk exposure by 95%, potentially cutting down value at risk provisions by hundreds of billions on bank balance sheets. Institutional scaling. 0.1% of volume equals 479 billion a day. XRP, as the top bridge asset for cross-border settlements, will surpass both the USD and Bitcoin in settlement volume, with on-demand liquidity corridors. At current date, 70 plus corridors, daily liquidity provisions exceeding 3 billion, and is projected to scale to 20 billion a day to support 14% of SWIFT volume. Every added corridor increases the value of RippleNet. Doubling corridors quadruples potential volume and utility. Active pilots in the EU, passported zones, and APAC regulatory sandboxings accelerate full-scale adoption, reducing the go-to market from 24 to just 6 months, everyone. 2-minute holding time for XRP liquidity requirements. That's about 660 billion per day. This could drive XRP's price into double/triple digits, depending on utility demand, obviously, and these on-demand liquidity corridors. If we use an average of 1 minute and 20 seconds here for the holding time, the required float would shrink to 396 billion. On-ledger AMM pools, like Uniswap style, could supply little less than 200 billion in passive liquidity, earning protocol fees that underwrite corridor operations. And we look at the utility-driven model here. The value tied to real-world financial plumbing, small XRP burn rates increase scarcity over time. Remember, the more XRP that's used, the more XRP that's burnt. The more XRP that's burnt, the more scarce that XRP becomes. This is all growth driven by transaction volume. Strategic interest institutional entry. 70 plus ODL partners globally, ISO 20022 compliance for banking and fintechs, next-gen messaging layer capabilities. Top-tier pilots already going on. Santander, Standard Chartered, SBI, they all run about north of 500 million a month in test flows, laying the groundwork for a full-on rollout coming later in Q3 of this year. When we look at the ISO 20022 compliance, we look at a Bahamas Sand Dollar-tized EBOT, and those can plug directly into RippleNet rails, broadening the use case beyond commercial banks to central banks. Your future outlook here? Well, 1 to 3% of SWIFT capture is $12.5 to $37.5 trillion per year. Corridor scaling, not yet priced in. XRP transactions from speculation to the backbone of the new financial system. When we talk about the XRP price, when we talk about where would it take it, where would it be? Remember, this is just with Swift. This has nothing to do with any other adoption or the ETF inflows that would be coming. So if we look at this, if we look at a $1.4 trillion cap here, we'd be looking at $28 per XRP. But if we do the multiplier on this thing, we could see a $40 to $60 per XRP is not without of the question. And now it just put us north of a $2 trillion market cap. And that is just one use case we are talking about. We've spoken about a 3-digit XRP. A 3-digit XRP is happening. The question is, when does that happen? All eyes on Ripple's takeover of Swift, because it is happening right in front of your very eyes. I'm going to leave it like that. Make sure you like and follow the channel. I'll catch everyone on the next one.